Banks wins DipCon title, ranks key to the DBNI, and thanks for tournaments worldwide. I'm David Hood of the Diplomacy Broadcast Network, and this is Deadline, DBN's monthly news program. Dateline, October 2024. For our feature story, variant rules and maps for the play of diplomacy have existed just about as long as the diplomacy hobby itself has existed. Some diplomacy variants have actually been released commercially, such as Machiavelli and Colonial Diplomacy. By the way, a new version of which, called Era of Empire, is on the way for 2025 from Renegade. But many other variants have been fan-produced and fan-played. The currently running Tournament Through Time has used a number of variant maps from prolific variant creator Alex Ronco. Later in the show, we'll check on the current status of this event with Alex and see the variant being used for the final round of that tournament. But first, a look at headlines from around the world of diplomacy. The global hobby has exploded with face-to-face tournament results since our last episode of Deadline. Katie Gray, who was the featured interview for last month, went on right after that to win the inaugural Diplomacy Masters in Las Vegas in late September, beating a top board featuring Jeff Heyman, Jack Brawner, Nick Benedict, Ed Prim, Mark Eggerman, and Richard Sweat. A few days after that, Dan Lester added the UK National Championship title to his 2022 World DipCon title and other past tournament wins. Ian Wilson and Micah Bloom also placed in the top three at that UK tournament. Below, I have linked coverage for that event both from DBN and from the DiploStrats channel on YouTube. The weekend after that saw Adam Silverman repeat as Weaselmoot champion in Chicago, over at Ed Sullivan and Tim Crosby finishing second and third. And then the weekend after that, which was the second weekend in October, the first ever Hechstecken tournament was held in Dresden, Germany. It was won by past world champion Cyril Sivin, with the young Nico Badircic taking second. Thanks to DBN's own Robert Schuppe for running this first German event in many years. And congratulations to all the winners and participants from this very busy fall tournament lineup. All right, now, you didn't think I would leave out the first Asia-Pacific Diplomacy Championship, did you? No. That same weekend as the Hechstecken, the Asia-Pacific DipCon was held at the State Library of Victoria in Melbourne. 31 players participated in this three-round event run by hobby legend Andrew Goff. Max Roe Banks emerged victorious, edging former world champ and fellow Canberra player Jamal Blakarli by less than one supply center to take the title. Stay tuned, because later in this broadcast, we'll talk to Max about his DipCon win. Melbourne's Zoe Cameron took the third tournament position. She also took Best France. Banks won Best Russia to go along with his AP DipCon win, with other Best Country awards going to Dominic Stevens, Gavin Atkinson, Tianu Sun, Connor Bennett, and Tim Jones. In other exciting news from the event, the participants took a vote to authorize the formation of the Asia-Pacific Diplomacy Association, which is now in the process of being formed. With the Australian Open also coming up in Canberra the first weekend of November, as well as the running of the Bangkok Open, January 24 through 26, 2025, this is simply a wonderful time to be alive and playing diplomacy in that region of the world. As the February 2024 through January 2025 diplomacy season winds down, it's time to start thinking about the upcoming Diplomacy Broadcast Network invitation. It's a virtual event, and the reason we're thinking about it is because it will be here before we know it. Our hobby's upcoming February FIVA will be the fifth such event, with its first taking place in 2021 after the 2020 diplomacy season. Competition for the 28 available spots for the DBNI is already hot and heavy. Our DBN show Countdown recently released its first episode of the season, with co-hosts Brian Pravel and Zachary Moore covering the current bracket, including the top 28 players through mid-September, as well as those right on the bubble, those hoping against hope to break into the field of players invited to diplomacy's big dance. The guys also covered the race for Rookie of the Year and made predictions for how the rest of the season may shake out. You can catch this countdown episode by using the link provided below. How can one still obtain DB&I points at this late point in the season? There's actually several face-to-face opportunities coming up, in addition to league or virtual events. On the face-to-face circuit, we have the long-running Carnage event in Vermont, run by veteran organizer David Maletsky. This is one of 3 events the first week in November, along with the aforementioned tournament in Canberra, as well as the first ever Dutch National Championship taking place in Groningen. Later in the month, the French National Diplomacy Championship will run as usual in Paris. In this case, November 22nd through 24. The schedule page on our DBN website is a good one-stop shop for information on these events, including how to register. I have included links to that page below, along with links to the Facebook pages used by both the European and Australian hobbies to promote their events. And I've also linked more information on the French Championship. The DBN website also provides information for the other DB&I points opportunities, which include several virtual diplomacy leagues and online extended deadline leagues. Also, late breaking news, a new club was just formed for face-to-face pickup games in the Australian state of Victoria. I've provided a link below for that as well. Let's turn now to the subject of those virtual face-to-face leagues I just mentioned. By the time you see this episode, the latest round of the Tour of Britain League will have already taken place, but the last round of the tour is currently scheduled to take place the weekend of November 16 and 17 on the VWDC Discord server. You need not have played any previous rounds of the tour to participate in this live virtual face-to-face action. Remember, if you want to play in the DB&I this February, you will need to have played some virtual face-to-face at some point during this diplomacy season. Games in these virtual leagues are actually a good way to satisfy this DB&I requirement. Another league option is the Australia-based Snake Pit League, which will have just finished its latest game day when you see this episode of Deadline. I provided the Discord server link below for future reference. The 7 Years War League, which is based in Europe, also continues its regular season, with Australia's Jamal Blakarli currently leading in the hunt to secure one of the 7 spots of that league's top board for 2024. There is a link to the current standings below, along with the 7 Years War League rules. Finally, the Virtual Diplomacy League held its October game day recently, which was covered live right here on DBM. There are 2 more VDL game days to go before the top board this January, so it is never too late to join in on the fun. Below is a link to the VDL standings and the information about VDL, which is housed on our DBN website. Every month, we like to report on the latest and greatest audio, video, or visual content from creators we call our DBN media partners. Oliver Lugg recently released a video explaining his concept for 5D diplomacy, with time travel. It's an outgrowth of his earlier video about 5D chess. You may recall Oliver from his popular YouTube offering Diplomacy, the Game of Knife, and from his play in several iterations of the Media Wars extended deadline tournament. I have linked his newest video below, along with another one from DBN media partner Diplostrats, in which it is shown the first real playtest of Oliver's 5D diplomacy game variant. In other media news, the Australia-based Diplomacy Games podcast released its latest episode on October 11th, which can be found by navigating their website using the link in the show notes. The main topic of conversation are face-to-face events in the Asia-Pacific region, as well as current variant games being played by the podcast hosts Ambi and Kaner. Renegade, the publisher of the most recent version of Diplomacy, recently announced that it will release the first commercially produced diplomacy variant in many years. Era of Empire is a rework of Avalon Hill's game Colonial Diplomacy, including some new mechanics, the details of which have not yet been disclosed. We have seen the new map and cover art for Era of Empire, as well as details on the neato cool wooden pieces planned for this edition. Brace yourselves to play one of Turkey, Britain, France, Russia, Japan, China, or the Netherlands once Era of Empire comes to a retailer near you in 2025. I provided below a link from Renegade's website. Speaking of 2025, it is not too soon to make your plans to attend next year's World DipCon, to be held in San Francisco April 4th through 6th. Tournament director Adam Silverman has already released the registration form for the event, which I've linked below. There's also a website up and running to provide details about this face-to-face World Championship. There are to be 4 rounds of play over the 3 days of competition, along with a diplomacy-themed panel discussion Friday afternoon before round 1, hosted by yours truly, as well as the traditional hobby meeting that Saturday between rounds, with the main agenda item being the selection of the site for the 2027 World DipCon. Many hobbyists have already registered or announced their intent to attend, so do not miss this under any circumstances. Sign up today. An ad hoc group of interested hobbyists has for some time been working on how best to address the need for gender equality in the world of diplomacy. Led by past world champ Jamal Blakarli and current DipCon champ Katie Gray, the working group has now released a draft of its strategy for achieving better gender balance in hobby games as well as in hobby organizational activities. The draft has been released not as a final product, but in order to generate input and feedback from others, with the goal of refining and improving the overall product. Please use the link below to peruse the draft, and then you can contact Jamal or Katie through Discord or Facebook for more information, or feel free to drop me an email using davidhood@dixicon.com so that I can forward your thoughts to the working group as a whole. And now let's enjoy the latest installment of our continuing series of interviews with tournament winners. We call it the Winner's Circle. This month, we talk with Max Roe Banks, winner of the recent Asia Pacific Diplomacy Championships held in Melbourne, Victoria. Hey, Max, welcome to Deadline.
It's great to be here, David.
Great. Before we talk about the Asia Pacific DipCon, let's hear a little bit more about you personally. Where are you? What do you do? And how did you get involved in diplomacy?
Well, David, I am a Ninganayari man from northern Western Australia, but I've spent most of my life in Tasmania. And because I was, I guess, the equivalent of a liberal arts student, I ended up in our version of DC, which is much less glamorous, called Canberra. I guess I really got into this game probably when I was in, I think I was, the first time I came across it was probably grade 10 or something, and I was looking up guides for Risk, and I found this really niche English YouTuber or so, and he was just going through the whole game, and he was like, yeah, it's like Risk, but it's more stressful and much more anxious driving. And I thought, yeah, that's what I would love to play. That sounds like a game I would enjoy.
I also got into the game through Risk originally. And our group was looking for something that had less luck in it, but that was similar. So it shows you where things go.
Yeah, there's less luck in the movements. It's more luck in trying to make good impressions, which I quite like.
Yeah, well, is that what has piqued the interest in your game in this game?
I would say so. Yeah, it's the fact that I really like strategy games, and I really like social games that are really about trying to persuade people. Someone who's really liked Model United Nations and such, playing one that's much more about trying to navigate, I guess, alliances and people and board states. That's just straight up my alley.
What do you do when you're not winning diplomacy tournaments?
When I'm not winning diplomacy tournaments and, looking back at my trophy and wondering, how does it feel to be the best rusher of the Asia Pacific Championship? I do a lot of reading in history. I play a lot of Civilization and European Universalis. I am also, going for my Masters in International Relations. So I'm hoping I can chuck that on my CV when I put it I have my degree in my Masters and the 2024 Asia Pacific Champion.
I mean, you're literally an award-winning diplomat, is what you could say on a resume or a curriculum vitae somewhere.
I might write that down just before I forget that.
Award-winning diplomat. All right. This DipCon was not your first experience in a face-to-face tournament, so tell us how you've done in other events before this one.
So I've done 2 tournaments before. I did the Hung Parliament Handicap in, I think it was like April this year, and I came second at that. I was really surprised with myself. It was. I think I just came second by losing out by 1 or 2 points because, and I put this on myself later, I just wasn't ruthless enough. I just wasn't comfortable enough, taking more centers from people who were really just begging me not to. And I just felt comfortable. I had enough. I just got to be content. And my second tournament I did was the Cane Toad Classic, where I did very mediocre. I didn't die. I think my average center count was 6 or 7, and I just remember thinking it over and over, thinking this was just. I've been stalled before, but this just feels like I just have a lot of potential that's just not being realized. But probably one of the best things I got out of it was I won this little frog, which just had all these nice little colors on it, from Gavin, who does Diplomacy Games tournament. He said I won this trophy because I was the most fun player, overwhelmingly voted. So that was my pretty big silver lining from it.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think it was just a nice ego boost hearing overwhelmingly voted.
It's all in the packaging. It's important to package these things correctly. All right, so the Canberra Club. Have you been playing any of those games, those pickup games in the Canberra Club?
Oh yeah, I think that's what really restarted my interest in the game. I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And I saw these people playing with these sashes on them, and I saw Italy, Austria-Hungary, and Turkey, and I was like, okay, I think they're playing diplomacy. And I went over and I was just asking, like, so what's the deal with this? And this really nice, friendly guy by the name of Jamal, I don't know if you've heard of him, he said, yeah, we come in every month and we come here to play. Would that be something you're interested in? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I think ever since March or so, I've been playing pretty consistently monthly games, and it's just a very engaging community. It's a very welcoming community. It's just very positive, despite being a very at times ruthless game.
Yeah, it can be a little bit of a weird confluence or congruence between the game and the community around it, which is nothing like the game.
Yeah.
All right. Well, tell us about the Asia Pacific Championship. I guess my first question is, what was your key to victory?
What was my key to victory? I think I was very, very happy with my choice of country for my first round, and I was pretty excited just being there with a lot of people. My first country I got was Russia, and I'm comfortable with Russia. I quite like it. I have a fondness for Russia, and I managed to just be friendlier than most people, where I just happened to. I think I made good friends with Germany straight away. I had Turkey and Italy just trying to woo for my favor, and I just generally felt like I was trying to position myself as the prettiest girl at the dance. And as long as I kept pushing for that, I always had options. I think I was thinking about it afterwards, after all my games, and I think the reason my greatest success was I kept advancing my game state, but other people didn't. But not to bring it to that Genghis Khan quote of it's not enough to win, everyone else has got to lose. But there was definitely a lot of, I think no one could really realize the fullest of their game potential there. I think there's also, I think I had a lot of, I did second guess myself a bit in that first game where I was going to accept a draw after I got stabbed, but it ended up being vetoed by someone anonymously, and because of that, I got to get playing, and even after being stabbed, I managed to top the board quite miraculously, and I was quite chuffed with that. That gave me a real pivot my step. I don't know. And I think it was like that massive lead at the start I got there with. It was just a nice first game, 12% of Russia. I felt pretty chuffed with that. I felt quite comfortable. Except when I heard the results of the rest of the boards, I kept hearing something like, oh yeah, there's another 12 center Russia, there's 13 center France, there was a 16 center England, which I was just baffled by, very immediately being humbled by everyone else. But going to the next game, it quickly turned out that everyone else was going to target the people who topped the next boards. And so I got just dogpiled pretty much. I was just staying alive as Germany at one point, immediately getting attacked by one person I had eliminated in the previous game, and Marcus Lone choosing not to save my life and instead throw me under the bus.
Marcus, man, goodness.
It's so unlike him.
That is rough.
But I think it was because I got eliminated. I think I had a pretty good score, but I think I was like 10th on the ladder for it, and I think no one was talking about me for the third game. They were talking about people who were in the top 4 or so because they had really good scores. And on my third game, when I got France, the person who was coming first or second was England. And when I talked to Germany, Russia, and Italy, the same conversation kept happening of, okay, we got to kill England so they don't win the whole tournament here. And hearing that everyone wanted to attack them made me more incentivized to think, okay, I don't actually want to kill them. I just want to keep them on my side because I know everyone else is going to want to kill them, so they're not going to have many options.
Oh, that's very astute. It can be easy to jump on the bandwagon, but sometimes that's actually not in your personal self-interest.
I mean, the goal there is just to make sure they don't get a really good score. And if everyone is still attacking them and I'm the only person that's keeping them on life support, they're not really going to get a good score. Not that I wish to say that that Connor was on life support or anything, but I was quite happy. And he was kind of resigned to the fact that as France, I was going to be an English channel. And it was the only way to keep him alive. And I quite liked having that, that gun on the table because it became quite useful. And I think there's also the final thing I'd probably say that what I really did well was being able to, I guess, I don't want to say exploit scenarios, but really when stabs emerged, I was really keen to quickly maneuver or so. Like, I think in that game, Germany built a third fleet and they were signaling that they wanted to stab England because we were doing a Western triple, and it's like we got to keep this England down before they get too big. And I chose at that moment I would take Belgium from England, and because of it, I would also tell them, like, look, it's not going to be the end of things. I just have to take this. And I kept my options open because Germany was still set on taking English centres, but they couldn't really fight me if I flipped on Germany. So they had all this weaponry also that could only be used against England, so they could never stitch up that relationship again. And there was a final moment where I think the whole East, which was chaotic the entire time, finally grouped together, and they started pushing me back. And I was a bit worried when I was getting kicked out of Italy. And thankfully, even though I had been pretty rude to Italy and taken 2 home centres and really I forced them. They'd offered to destroy their fleet. They had Germany snipe one of their centres, and they immediately were like, "Okay, I'm happy to work with you again, France. This guy just does not understand how to work with a coalition here because this is not how you keep alliances working." And I was more than amenable. I was quite happy. Like, yeah, of course we can work things out. Just let me back into Rome and Naples, and we can, sort the rest of your stuff out.
And he was sorted.
He was sorted. He was comfortable ending. If Germany doesn't stab in that game, though, it's strange because I think Italy has a really good chance of topping just because it has so many armies in the east, and no one had realized how quickly they were growing. Actually,
what do you like? You said you particularly liked Russia. What do you like about playing Russia?
It's big. It's big. You have to talk to everyone. I think. I originally, when I first played it, I thought you don't have to talk to border countries, but you have to talk to everyone. And I quite like that. I like having, even though, you have 4 centers at the start, you have a lot of, your influence isn't overwhelming until you really are pronounced in those regions. Like, at times it feels like you're playing 2 countries with 2 armies or 2 units.
Absolutely. That's exactly what you're doing a lot of the
time.
Yes.
And I I think it's very fun to run away with games as Russia. I get shocked how quickly you can get, like how big you can get really fast, and I like building fleets, and having the option to build fleets that can rival England that's really fun as Russia.
Well, I think people either hate playing Russia or love playing Russia. It's kind of hard to be in the middle on it because it is completely unique, I think, in the game, straddling the stalemate line and sort of having to play in both ponds from the very beginning to have a good game. I mean, you can have a good game and just be dominant in the north or just be dominant in the east, whatever, but it's hard to do.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think I've had so many people complain about Russian like horror stories where it's always I was going really well. I had one stab and then I was out. It's just one. I got one kick in and then I was done. And I think if you don't want to be a glass cannon as Russia, you want to be able to, if you need to take a hit, being able to swing back even harder. Which I think I felt that with when I got stabbed as Russia and I think I lost 2 centers in one turn, which was pretty bad. But I just immediately just disbanded all my units I had in the north and just consolidated in the south, and I hit back even harder. I think it's just a big mistake a lot of people make with Russia, where they have like 2 bad games with Russia because they get beaten bad in one game, or they just can't recover enough. They don't have enough, tempo or so.
Tempo and resilience, because you are going to have some Russian games where you get really big and then you get killed, because the harder in Russia, it's hard to defend yourself if you're being attacked from multiple fronts.
Yeah, I mean, you're everywhere. You're bordering 4 countries. You're going to have some bad games.
Yeah, it's good offensively and bad defensively, the situation you're in. All right, now this is your chance to dish a little bit about personalities. Tell us some people that you played with that are particularly memorable, or comments you want to make, or impressions you want to make about any of the players with whom you've competed.
All right. First one who comes to mind, I think, is he's a Canberra boy. His name's Tian Yu, and he was the Germany in my Russia game who vetoed the draw. And the reason I bring it up is because he was only on like 4 or 3 centers or something as a Germany, and England had taken a lot of stuff. And even though Italy had stabbed me and he was on 11 to my 8, he decided to veto the draw, not because he necessarily wanted, he saw that I could keep getting back into it. He just thought I would like to end on 6 centers rather than 3. And if Max has to suffer, then during that, that's fine. And because he vetoed that draw, I ended up managing to scrounge a victory out of that. But probably my favorite player in that game was actually Robert Hillier, who played Italy. And he was really fun and engaging. And pretty much on the first fall, he came up to me and was like, we can just kill Austria. And, he made me an offer, like, look, if you want to do something really like super turbocharged, awesome moves at the start, and we can go straight up to Turkey after that. And I really liked how, I guess, he was just very fun and engaging. He was really offering me a lot of plans, and he was always keen to keep working together. And it was a very calming presence at times, even though it was just a lot of. I think it was very fun to smash Turkey in about 2 years with him. That was probably one of my favorite moments of the game. I think any other shout outs? I think the best compliment I got in that game as France was from Dominic Stevens, and he was Turkey and I was France. And when I destroyed the last Italian fleet, I realized that Dominic as Turkey could probably get out of his box now. So I had to quickly move into a position where I had like a fleet in Eastern Med and Ionian, and I realized I could do a French Lepanto and stuff. And I was just in maze of like, oh my God, I get to finally do this. This is sick. I've dreamt of this one moment, and I finally get to do it against such a good player. And I remember afterwards, he was just in such pressure because every time he felt like he could get out, there was just suddenly a new person was there, and he had to just keep covering his centers and such. And afterwards the game, he shook my hand and said, "Max, you played that masterfully. That was fantastic." And I was very chuffed with that.
Dominic Stevens, the chief economist for the country of New Zealand.
He is the money man of the NZ.
Well, that's any other personalities, or is that as many
Trying to think
people as you want to talk about?
I think Alan Thompson calling me after he was Turkey in my Russia game and calling me a bad man, and apparently that being the biggest compliment you can get from him. Which I was a bit taken aback at first. I'm like, how? Oh, that's so rude. But then everyone telling me like, oh, that just means he liked that. I think. Turns out he would in my second game as like when I was Germany, he moved to Tyrolia, convinced France to go to Burgundy, immediately tried to force Munich. It really just stagnated my game from the start. But I took some consolation from the fact that in that game, even though he went straight for me, Austria built a fleet, which was immediately, oh, so this Italy game's not going to go great for you either because now you're focused on me. Anyway, and I guess who else would I like to mention? But yeah, I'll probably say Connor, who was England in my final game. He was very, very fun to work with, even though I did take a center off him. And I remember in the last year, him coming up to me and was like, all right, so I know you're probably going to make some stabs at the very end. Do you have like, and I remember just thinking like, I could probably take Holland off him. I'm still in English Channel. I can move to Irish. I can take Liverpool. There's nothing he can do. And I felt strangely comfortable. And I looked him in the eyes and I said, how do we get you and me one more center each? And he was, I think there was a bit of confusion, a bit of the blood had drained from his face, and now it was all good again. And I think he was surprised. He wasn't sure to believe me, but I was very happy with how we'd worked together. And I think at the end he came third, also coming back from losing Norway and being kicked out of Belgium by me. But he'd done it against a very resilient Germany who kept coming and try and hit back at him to try and build armies to defend against me.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, we should probably shout out to who ran the tournament and say just a minute about that.
Yeah, big kudos to Andrew Goff. Big fan. I think when I finished my final game, when he gave me the trophy, he said, Max, I think you're quite a good diplomacy player. Which, I mean, that might be better than Dominic's comment about me playing masterfully. I think
there's nothing wrong with being complimented by Andrew Goff. There's nothing wrong with that.
To earn his good favors.
Yep. All right. Well, this event that you just won, in my opinion, it's important in the history of the hobby in your part of the world. It's the first regional championship that was, set up exactly like that in the Asia Pacific region. And indeed, there has been a flowering of diplomacy activity in Australia, particularly in the last year or so. How exciting is that for you and the fellow hobbyists in your region?
It's awesome, David. Like, truly, I think, I mean, I remember the hardest thing about trying to play diplomacy in high school was finding 6 other people who wanted to play diplomacy in high school.
Yeah.
And I remember when I started helping with the hobby here in Canberra, we were like so chuffed when we had a few extra people to help people play one board. And I remember it was 2 months ago, we were just shocked when it was the first time we ever got 4 boards to play with. 28 people to come and play this game. That's from like the 50s or 60s. That's like from where we were. It was such an achievement. And I got to meet really lovely people. I got to go to Brisbane. I love going to Brisbane, Queensland's lovely, great weather. And I got to go there to play a board game that I really enjoy and meet people who really like to talk about it and debrief with it. And it is that social part of meeting a lot of people afterwards who just want to debrief and just want to talk about, could I have done this differently? What went wrong here? That's my favorite thing about this game, I think. It's just grabbing like a pint or so afterwards and just thinking what could have gone differently and how well did you think I actually played that?
Yeah, it is absolutely awesome. And there's an old saying in the hobby that you come for the game and you stay for the people. And I think that's largely true. Speaking of which, what are your plans to attend your next event? I'm sure you have some plans, so let's hear them.
Yeah. So we've got this tournament in. Well, I don't know when this is coming out, but we have this tournament on the 1st of November to the 3rd called the Australian Open, which is not related to tennis. but it will be in Canberra. And I guess because it's a 40-minute commute to get there to the tournament headquarters, I think I will be attending, and I think I have to try and defend my title. I'm very much expecting to get dogpiled, but I think the best pitch I can make to a lot of people is I'm very fun to work with. I will wind people up who we want to annoy. I will always be a friend as long as we can keep talking about the future together. And yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of good people. If the people I met in Brisbane and Melbourne are any indication of how welcoming and fun this community is, come to Canberra and, try and smash me. You probably can, but don't feel compelled to beat me. Just come.
Well, that's a good way to end things. Anything else you want to say about diplomacy in Australia, about the tournament you won, or anything else you want to leave us with?
I would say this game is a lot more daunting going into it than actually playing it at times. I think people can get intimidated by it, but it is actually so much fun. And when you actually get someone you can trust in this game, even though they could flip on you, having someone you can actually work with and trust and have an alliance with is one of my fondest memories first getting back into this game. And so I would recommend anyone who really likes strategy games, who wants a better game than Risk, just get a diplomacy board out. Find friends to come play this game.
That is a good way to end. Thank you so much, Max, for being on the show, and good luck at the Australian Open.
Thank you for having me, David.
And now for the segment of Deadline we call What to Play. Let's check back in on the tournament through time, an extended deadline diplomacy variant tournament being run by North Carolina hobbyist and variant designer Alex Ronka. All right, now for a segment of our show we call What to Play. Let's check back in on the tournament through time, which is an extended deadline diplomacy variant tournament being run by North Carolina hobbyist and variant designer Alex Ronka. Alex, welcome back to Deadline.
Hey, good to be back.
All right, last time you were here, we talked about some earlier rounds of the current tournament through time, but I understand that you've just completed round 3 and have just recently started round 4, so it's time for an update. First of all, remind us again the format of the tournament before we dive into round 3.
Right. So this is a 4-round tournament that takes place over the course of the year 2024, with 1 year approximately each quarter. Each game is limited to 7 years of play so that we can keep the schedule going in a very predictable pace. The 4th round is a top table. The top 9, or we'll get into the exacts on this, but basically the top 9 who can play, playing, and then of course the top scorer from that board, either whoever tops the board or whoever solos, if they manage to do that, wins the entire tournament with a more kind of comprehensive scoring for all the other ranks. And your placement in that top table is based on the top 2 scores from the first 3 rounds. So people could take a bye, and many people did take a bye.
All right, so for round 3, the variant that you're playing is Order of the Dragon, right?
Yes, we played Order of the Dragon for round 3. We had 3 tables of that. If you want to pull up a map of that real quick, I can.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about this variant, if you would.
Right. So all the variants that we did for the tournament involve what's called DP mechanics, diplomacy points, in which you secretly influence neutrals to do your bidding. Order of the Dragon introduces some additional mechanics where you can essentially, you have these little airs, which if you were to zoom in, you'd see these little flags near some of the SCs.
Well, by airs, you mean HEIRS.
Right, HEIRS, airs. And they don't have to necessarily be actually sons and daughters so much as just like a representation of political influence that can be put in other places.
So are we seeing it on the screen here? Are we seeing it on the screen?
So like you can see one there near Krakow.
Yeah.
So that Krakow is an example of what the rules call a thrall, where this is the starting position. So you start with one as Lithuania. You get this thrall in Krakow, which represents the relationship between what had been Lithuania and Poland at the time. Similarly, Hungary has a has a thrall up in Brandenburg because the Emperor of Hungary was also the Elector of Brandenburg at the time, Sigismund. So there's some relationships like that there. The Napoli has the power called Naples down in Italy has a thrall with Rome because the Pope happened to be Neapolitan at the time, things along those lines. So this represents a variety of different types of political affiliations. And these thralls act a lot like the neutrals, except they give a bonus to whoever's heir is there. So first off, if you have a thrall, you get to count that toward your total SCs for victory purposes. And for scoring purposes. And also any of your diplomacy point DP allocations to that thrall count double. So your influence is worth more to that thrall than other people's influence. But that doesn't prevent those thralls from still betraying you, and that definitely happened in some of these games.
Anything else about the map that you want to talk about before we move on to one of the games that was played?
Right. So this is circa 1405. This is late Middle Ages, after the after the plague has basically ravaged Europe. The name Order of the Dragon comes from an order of chivalry that was created about this time, and happens to be the order of chivalry that became the name Dracula in the old stories, because it was I think it's Vlad Dracul or whatever. He was given that title because he was a member of the Order of the Dragon. So I had kind of started with this date and concept, and then applied a bunch of other rule set kind of stuff later, but liked the interesting geography I was seeing in one of the older maps that I had, and the map had a number of incorrect borders on it, which I've gone ahead and preserved most of them just because they're kind of interesting. Like Albania was never that shape, but this map had it that way. Just kind of like playing on, okay, this is the record we've got, with some alterations here and there, just trying to keep faithful to that record to really preserve that old feel. So yeah, fun stuff.
All right. Well, you figured out a way to get Dracula into our Halloween episode of Deadline. So good for you. Well, let's go on then to one of the actual games that was played.
Right. Yeah. So there were
you said there were 3 rounds, right?
3 rounds, and this is the 3rd round, and there were 3 tables this round. It turned out we had 3 tables for each of the 3 rounds, and so we have tables 24G, 24H, and 24I. So if you want to go ahead and pull up 24G, we can talk about that one.
All right, working on it. Here we go. 24G.
All right. So this game was dominated. We had a sort of Western triple going on between the Kalmar Union in that kind of lemon yellow, England in pink, and Castile in kind of a maroon red. And a lot of the stripes you're seeing are because of one of the mechanics of this map, which are vassals, which are new powers you create with your heirs, but that they're jointly controlled by 2 players on the map. And so it gets a little confusing to look at this because there's so many vassals. Specifically on this table, that had so many. A lot of these places ended up striped. So these 3 players who I think all had a vassal together at some point. It was kind of a mess. They really worked together as an alliance to build up as many SCs as they could amongst themselves. It ended up at the very end with Kalmar Union capturing just 1 more, which knocked her into the first seed. That power was played by L. And then you had England played by David Gold and Castile played by Skiddard 30, who had previously gotten a top board in round 1. And so they, some of the other people that might be recognized here. So Ben Durf played the Golden Horde.
That's the Diplomacy World variant editor.
Yes. And so Golden Horde out there in sort of light blue cyan. Let's see, Eric Ealing and Marcus Zylstra. I'm not sure if I have to pronounce
Marcus Zylstra, yeah.
Zylstra. Okay, yeah. So Captain Meme in the Ottomans, who finished pretty close to he was kind of lagging for most of the game, and managed to scoop up some SCs at the end, and even had a very narrow chance to top the board, but it didn't end up working out.
Well, it's a good situation when you've got more than one person with a chance to top the board. I mean,
Right. Yes,
that's really
that was
what
a
you want.
very close game at the end. It all came down to just like one SC here or there.
All right. Well, let's look at the next board, which I think is 24H, perhaps.
Yes.
Let me put that on the screen here.
So this one, my assistant GM, Ryan Rutledge, or Wacka, managed this one. And we actually had 3 different assistant GMs through the tournament. And oddly enough, all 3 of them ended up at the top table, even though they each had to miss a round. So they just played that well during their other 2 rounds. So in here, we had Enoch, also known as Celebrimbor, playing England with 13. Jeff Pierce, who made an appearance at Dixie a couple years ago, playing Hungary with 9 SCs. And we had in Lithuania Walshy, or Dahi Walsh, from Ireland, taking Lithuania to a top board with 15 SCs. So that this game was not quite so close. England and Lithuania were definitely kind of vying for the top. Lithuania had a couple options that might have even knocked it into solo territory. It just didn't end up playing out quite that well.
Did this game have as much of the vassal action as the last one?
It had some of it. What ended up happening was a lot of those vassals got killed in the same turn that 2 other powers got knocked out. You had a 7 SC power, Castile, played by Brown 496, and a 4 SC power, Naples, played by Rascal Red, that in the same year, all the kind of all the stars aligned such that they both got knocked out early, and that involved killing off a whole lot of the vassals that they had already created. In Order of the Dragon and in the next map, Saga of the Nine, which we'll show for round 4, there's mechanics to get knocked out early when your capital's taken out and when all of your heirs are killed, which means all of your thralls are gone, all of your vassals are gone, and your capital's gone. Well, then you can be knocked out, and anything you have left over turns neutral, which we'll see in the next table, actually. But that managed to happen for 2 players at the same time and threw the whole board into a muck. So less vassal activity by the end of the game than there was earlier on as a result of that.
Well, let's go to that last game then. You can talk about, was it 24I, I believe it is?
24I.
How about this one?
Yeah, so here we had some early success from Castile, played by Tyler F., and the Golden Horde, played by Adam Bagley. But neither ended up topping at the end. We had some shrewd maneuvers going on by the Kalmar Union, there in yellow, played by Jonathan Strange, and Naples, played by Andrew Koch, who managed to eke out 2nd and 3rd at the table. But it was the Ottomans who managed to top the board, in part because there was some sort of deliberately king-making moves going on from Bagel. So you'll notice that Bagel,
no, not in a diplomacy game. There's no king-making in diplomacy.
Yeah. Bagel ended up, for various reasons, decided to shift some SCs toward Burgerman, who played the Ottomans. And Bagel ended up getting himself eliminated in that final year. So you'll see those neutrals in what was Krakow and some of those other spots. Those were all territories that the Golden Horde held, but because the Golden Horde was eliminated, those, if we were to continue playing this game, would all be converted to neutral armies or whatnot. So, but yeah, that final elimination definitely carried the Ottomans to the top. And but good on Burgerman. I think he's still in, I want to say he's in high school. He's actually the student of one of our other players, which is kind of fun. But yeah, he managed to nab a spot at the top table as a result of this. So
now, after looking at all 3 of these games, do you have any takeaways from those results in terms of the tournament or in terms of the variant itself, in terms of additional play testing of that variant?
I really liked the variety of kind of results that we had here. There are a couple little balancing things that I want to do with this map. There's one specific change that I actually kind of talked with publicly about the players after the games were all done. Burgundy, which is kind of the near black color on there, has always been a bit of a weak spot. And in these 3 games, Burgundy got wiped out pretty fast. In other games, it's had different ranges of success, but it's always struggled. And so there's a pending change that should help Burgundy without kind of kicking it too far up. But that'll be for future games of this.
Okay. All right. So you've just started round 4, and you've already talked about the fact that is the variant Saga of the Nine. So here's the map for that one. Tell us a little bit about this variant, if you would.
Right. So this variant, so all those mechanics I was talking about thralls and vassals and heirs, we piloted those rules with this variant. So this was a co-production from myself and Chris Helwig, who you might see as East Canese online. And he had made a variant based on Song of Ice and Fire. He'd taken an existing map somebody had done with Song of Ice and Fire and added some new rules where you had heirs that could get married to one another. These rules were not quite the same as what we ended up in Saga of the Nine, but I wanted to adapt those to the DP system and figure out how they could fit in a context of diplomacy points. And so we worked together and came up with ideas for basically how would we spawn off new powers? How would we influence these neutrals through marriage? And so that led to the rule set that eventually became both Saga of the Nine and later Order of the Dragon. The setting for Saga of the Nine is actually the North Pole, but it's the North Pole as drawn by Mercator back when they didn't actually know what the North Pole fully looked like. So this is sort of a hypothetical geography that Mercator put on his map using the known borders that they had for Scandinavia, which you can actually see kind of in that teal blue in the bottom. That's Scandinavia. You have kind of some of what they knew about Iceland and Greenland there. But they took the borders that they knew about, sort of, and then added a bunch of other stuff, thinking that there might be essentially like a continent up on the North Pole. So this takes that kind of alternate geography and plants it firmly in kind of like an alternate Earth. So it's sort of fantasy. There's no actual elves or dwarves or anything like that, but I used these names and motifs from Norse mythology to really populate these 9 groups using different terms that when translated would be dwarves or elves or whatever, but in this particular case they're just the names of the powers. So we've got these 9 players around here, and unlike Order of the Dragon, nobody starts with any thralls, so they all start with unmarried heirs, and they kind of choose their own thralls if they want them and have to fight over who gets to marry who.
Tell us a little bit about the 9 players who are playing in this final.
Right. So the top table we ended up with, we ended up having 2 players that had to bow out. The person who had the 3rd seed was Skitter 30, who had topped the board in the first round and tied for 2nd in the 3rd round. She had some other personal conflicts and couldn't manage the time. The 10th place player, who then got a slot, Eric Ealing, also had to bounce because he's got a wedding to prepare for. He's getting married, so congratulations to him. So our top 9 that we ended up with, Ryan Rutledge, Wacka, Jonathan Strange, Burgerman, Jeff Pierce, L, Brandon Custer, or Small Song, Dahi Walsh, or Walshy, Enoch, or Celebrimbor, and David Gold. And so we did a Paris method draft to figure out where they're all going to land. And so now we've gotten just 1 turn in so far. We've had 1 spring with, actually this evening, we'll be adjudicating the autumn for that first year. And while that's going on, we have, in order to keep some of the other tournament players kind of interested and active on the server, we're running 3 sort of exhibition matches of the Baltic variant that I brought to DixieCon. The 6-player, very vanilla variant. There's no DP rules or anything like that. Just for fun. It doesn't count toward any score. But I've got Ryan Rutledge and Jeff Pierce helping out with the GMing on that, so that I don't have to manage 4 games, because I really couldn't do that.
Well, we would hate to tax your brain too much.
Well, it's you just run out of time at a certain point.
Well, do you have plans to do another tournament through time once this round 4 is over?
Eventually, yes. So the last one we did was 2018. This one was 2024. I don't know if I'll wait 6 whole years again. But it is taxing enough to both the GM and the players that it's not going to be an annual thing. So maybe it'll be more like the Olympics and be like every 4 years. But I do have plans next year to run just one-off variants. They won't have scoring systems and such like that. We'll follow very similar rules for how I structure the games. But we have a global variant called Intercontinental that uses the DP system. We're going to probably run another round of Order of the Dragon using the new tweaks to Burgundy. A couple other things like that. So I'm looking forward to some new games next year. I'm going to try to also get some people involved that got interested in these games but didn't sign up for the tournament and weren't kind of available in time to actually play in the rounds. So hopefully,
if someone wants to get involved in any of your variant gaming, how would they do that?
Right. Best thing to do is you can either contact me directly on Discord or just hop into my server. We got records of games passed, links to various rules documents on my website as well, and you can talk to people about the games that are going on. We don't. Some Discord servers do allow for a sort of spectating mode where you watch the negotiations between players. We don't do that. We keep public channels public, but private channels private. But if you do want to see sort of how the game's progressing, you want to see all the maps for the different turns on the games, you can do that, and they're all there available.
So send me a recent invite to that.
I will.
To your Discord server, and I'll add it to our show notes for this particular episode of Deadline. Alex, thank you so much for coming on here and giving us an update on the tournament, and
Sure.
keep varianting.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to see how this all finishes up. And do we have a moment to show the prize?
Hold on a minute. Let me see.
Did I send you that?
You did, but I don't know that I pulled that up. So give me 1 second to see if I can do that. We are testing my abilities on the fly, which anybody that knows me will tell you is a relatively dangerous thing to do. Let's see if this is what you are talking about, Alex Ronka.
Yes. So one of my other hobbies is I do some design work for the mechanical keyboard hobby. And this is not a keyboard I designed. It is a key set I designed. But I did put together this particular keyboard. It's custom made as the kind of blue ribbon prize for this tournament. And we've got an engraving on the back that essentially says Diplomacy Tournament Through Time Champion 2024 or something along those lines. So I just really wanted something solid and physical to give for this tournament. Other prize winners from like 2nd to 9th place or whatever will probably get certificates that they can print out. But I really wanted like one true prize out of this. And so I'm really proud to kind of share that keyboard.
Hey, didn't Eber Condrel win the first tournament through time, or am I remembering that? Who won?
No, you may be thinking of a different tournament entirely.
Maybe, yeah.
Because the last tournament through time in 2018 was a team tournament, and the team that ended up winning included Wacka, Adam Bagley, and Walshy. So 3 people who are currently at the top table, plus one other person. Oh, geez. I'll have to go back and check. That's
all right. It was 6 years ago.
Yeah, it's I remember him, but his name has escaped me for the moment.
Well, that's fine. Alex, again, thanks for being on the show, and we'll check in with the winner when you tell me who it is.
All right.
Thanks to all of you watching at home. We hope you have enjoyed this broadcast of Deadline. If you have news, ideas for features, or feedback of any kind, please feel free to send an email to info@diplobn.com, or you can drop me a line directly using davidhood@dixiecon.com. To review all of our broadcast offerings, visit our website, www.diplobn.com. This is David Hood signing off. I wish you brightness and bliss and, of course, Belgium.